Okay, hello. So, starting from where we left the other day, we were talking about the most important elements, or the seven important elements of fiction, writing stories, narratives. And today, after finishing with the plot, remember, I'll come back to plot with a bit of more information, but let's just finish these seven elements first. So, after plot, the most important thing to keep in mind is who is telling the story, or whose point of view the story from, or in other words, whose perspective is that. Now, before you decide which point of view you want to take up to write your story, you need to make sure how many characters would you need. So in the course of this class, this video, we will look into point of view, which definitely will make us look into characterization, types of characters, how do we characterize them, what are the things that are needed to characterize, and what is a conflict. How is a conflict such an important aspect, such an integral, indispensable aspect of a short story? So these three things are what we are going to look at, starting first with point of view. And why is this important? Because it allows you how much you can divulge, how much story you can make visible to your reader. When you think of the objective point of view, this is that point of view where nothing is explained. Very easily it could have been called a subjective point of view, because after reading the story, it's actually depending on the reader what meaning to make of the story. Sometimes things happen. This is also known as dramatic point of view. It happens so that things happen without really knowing why things are happening. This is definitely one of the least used points, perspectives to be right while writing a short story. Coming to the next one, which is the most popular one, which is the omniscient or the third person point of view, where you are the god of your short story. You can know everything that is going on in everyone's head. You can decide anything that is going to happen, and you are not a part of the story. You are above it, you are beyond it, you are the omniscient God who is controlling everything that is happening in the story. So, this omniscient or third person point of view gives you the maximum leverage to play with your plot, to play with your characters, but every advantage comes with a pinch of disadvantage, and this is where you need to be very careful that you don't end up, or you don't start losing the thread too far away so that you cannot get it back. You can only, as I was saying the other day, that you have 500 words, max 600 words, 1 hour to write your story. You cannot really let the plot go out of control, and this can be very, I'm not saying confusing, but it can become a bit problematic if you're not very careful, because this can just allow you to go on and on. Imagine you have 4 characters, you're trying to describe them, you go deep into them. By the end of characterization, you are done with 200 words, so you have very little space left to write down the rest of your story. So though it gives you a lot of leverage, it comes with own problems, so be very careful. Next is the first person point of view. This is that personal point of view, which is of course very limited, because it only tells the narrator's point of view, the narrator of a certain story. It is only from his or her point of view, which definitely cannot bring the whole story, the whole plot, what is going on everywhere, what is happening inside the person's head over the street, what is happening in the teacher's mind, what is happening in the policeman's side. It's just the main character, or rather I would say the narrator, whose mind we get to know from the first person. And also, this is a good tool when you are trying to talk about, you're writing a story where you need such a character who is a very individualistic character, who does not go with the flow, who does not really mind being secluded. Yeah, Corona, but whatever. It's not a story where you can explore a lot. As I said in the beginning, that your point of view depends on what kind of characters you're using. So a first person narrative is really because you're going inside the narrator's own psyche. You are dealing with one person's whole problems. So it is in a way some a story where the narrator is very important and the narrator's individualistic expressions and ideas are also very important. Again, first person actually allows you to have a lot of mystery, a lot of suspense in your story, because you are not entitled to say everything, because you are narrating from the I point of view. So you do get to hide things easily, but again, if you know what to do, if you know what you want to do, you can do that anywhere. Hiding details when you need to hide details, which you will need to write certain kinds of stories. So be careful about that. Coming to the fourth one is just a mixture of 2 and 3, where a bit of it has omniscient narration, where third person is narrative, and the bit of it has first person narration, whereas the narrator is telling the story. Right, so that's it. And with point of view, as I said, because the characters are so important, now we will move on to the art of characterization, types of characters, and how to make sure we have the perfect character for the perfect story. Okay, so yeah, we are into characterization now, and definitely without people, no story can become a story. You can't tell a story without people. You are trying to tell stories of people, so you need those people, and it is very important that you spend good time to structure your characters, to make them more meaningful, make them more believable and logical. Believable is that when you're creating the character, when you're giving the idea of the character in your story, it should feel like someone who's around us. Now, having said that, I also understand that a lot of you are reading a lot of fantasy fiction, which I'm not really very supporting enough, but it's okay. You should also read other things. But because of that prevalency, you are exposed to a lot of characters who are not at all similar to people around us. So you might have a doubt that don't these characters stand, because they are one of the best sellers of all time. Just take up, say, Hagrid from Harry Potter, or um, say what was that name? Maybe Sam from Lord of the Rings. They're not very normal characters. Maybe Sam is still normal, but Hagrid isn't. When you think of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, they're not very real characters, but then they are believable. How is that? How is that we believe them, though we know whatever they're doing is not possible? And that's where the point of believability, credibility, and more importantly, logicality comes. Remember, even in a fantasy fiction, even in a fantastical story, there is supposed to be logic. So if you are saying that somebody jumped off a cliff and started flying, you need a backstory that how that could be possible. Maybe he was blessed with wings at some point of time, which he might have forgotten now, and the nature of the boon might have been so that it would only appear when he's jumping off a cliff. Like the way what happens in Ramayana, the way Hanuman, before jumping over the ocean, rather flying over the ocean, he had no idea that he could do that. One very old guy comes up, Jambuvan comes up and says, Hanuman, you can do this because you've been blessed, you have that boon. And he does that. So it's just that the logic behind a certain character is very important. You just cannot make somebody fly without a proper base. Yes, maybe he is a magician who is hypnotizing a group of people who are thinking that he's flying, but probably he's not. You need that sense of credibility there in your story, otherwise it will fall flat, because if your character is not believable, nothing is believable. That's very important to know. Before we go into how to develop characters, we should know exactly what are different types of characters. So starting with round or stock characters. People, right, right, a little mistake here. Let's not go into that. Round characters are those characters are who can change in the course of the story. They are not somebody who would behave in the same manner always. Now, the moment I say this, you might have a lot of characters popping up in your head. Now, if you think that who could be a good example of a round character, uh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Round characters are those who change. Flat characters are those who do not change. So round characters are characters who can change in the course of the story, but flat characters never change. And then there could be someone who's dynamic, who's flat in the beginning and becomes round in the course of the story. So these two can be very intermingled, and I think it's a good idea to have such a developmental dynamic happening in your character. That the character in the beginning shows very someone who's very conformist, who is always trying to go with the flow, and because of something in the story, if there is a certain change that is again believable and logical, that makes your characters more meaningful, more expressioned, and they are definitely good for your grades. So these two are, I mean, you don't have to really break your heads here. You just have to remember, and if you have to think of maybe, I don't know which books you might read, but if you think of the character of, and I know I'm going a bit bizarre. If you think of Superman, I know he's a comic character, but he does not change. At least in the comics, he does not go much of change. But the same character, when Zack Snyder, the director, deals with Superman in the movie Man of Steel, he there shows those shades of his change. So the point is, any character can be characterized in a flat or in a static manner, and it can be developed into a more dynamic, more round character. So it's just that if this is difficult for me, and you can see I am also getting a bit confused, so it is better to remember that the characters don't change, and characters that change and characters that don't change, and at the end of the day you can actually have a mix up again with logical base. Coming to this is also something you may have heard in your poetic devices class. Anthropomorphism are characters which behave like humans. So if you think of Aesop's fables or all those stories where you have animals speaking the human language, animals who are speaking the human language, and they are talking as if they were humans, that is what you call an anthropomorphic character. And then the fourth one are definitely animal characters who are animal in their stories, who do not speak, who do not have a speech like humans have. And then the more important thing is the development of your character. And this is where you again have to be careful in terms of what character is this, how do you want to develop it. But again, remember, everything here can be applied. You can think of actions of a certain person or speech or appearance, but remember, you should never write that Meg is a brilliant woman or Jack is a dull-headed person. You should never write direct things. I mean, you can definitely write, but it is not going to help your cause. It is going to make your story a bit predictable, a bit cliched, something that the readers have been reading everywhere, especially your examiner, who would not be very impressed and would not end up giving you good grades. At the end of the day, it's just grades, grades. I know, can't imagine so much so, but can't help also. So I think it's sometimes we should be able to have a balance between our quality of work and grades. And at times, I mean, this is where I remember that great dialogue from Three Idiots: "Run behind excellence, success will come running behind you." I think, which is why it is better that we go deep into each subject and try and extract everything that is possible. So coming back to how to develop a character. So if you have a person who is like, you have an adventure story, so definitely you need 3 or 4 characters, one of them very risk taker, one of them who is like a supporter of the person who's taking the risk, the third guy or girl maybe someone who is a very careful character who's always stopping them from doing god forsaken, god forbidden things, which they find a lot of kick in it, as you say. And the fourth one could be the proverbial coward. I'm just saying it could be anything. 4 of them could be risk takers in your story. But again, you don't write that, oh, a guy, let us just name them Tom, Dick, and Harry. So Tom is a very valiant, courageous risk taker. You cannot write like that. You're no more in grade 5. Even grade 5 students would not try to tell, they would try to show, as you have been told for a long time that you are not supposed to tell, you're supposed to show. So that is what you will do in while your characterization, and actions speak much more than words. You must have heard this proverb before. So if you're showing a person who's a risk taker, show a person taking a risk. If you're showing a person who is a coward, utter coward, you can just show that how that person is afraid every moment of the adventure. You are showing a person who is very careful, meticulous. Make sure that that person is trying to find faults, loopholes in every plan. And you are able to show that, okay, yes, if you increase the level of meticulousness, at the end of the day, that character will become cynical, someone who's always finding mistakes. So you have to be careful there also, that how much of action you need to show to prove that your person, your character is either intelligent, risk taker, dull-headed, smart, romantic, evil, villainous, or like your unfortunate teacher. Anyway, so moving over to speech, a person who cusses all the time, we don't like such people. Yeah, definitely, we don't like. So, but again, you have to remember that when you're writing a story, you are not allowed to cuss the way you cuss in your regular life. But there are swearing terms, there are swearing phrases which are allowed, and you know them what? One of them is holy cow instead of you know what. So a person who is using a lot of slang, a lot of swearing in his language, is a person who may not be very good controlling his or her emotions, may not be very temperamental. So that again is seen through that person's speech. So in your mind, when you're characterizing, speech can play a very big role for the reader to understand what kind of a character is this. Now you might ask that why is this so important? By the way, are you guys taking notes? You should, because I don't think this video is going to stay for long. So it's better you take your or you can once you can take a picture so it will stay somewhere. But I guess taking running notes is something that you should start taking up, start building upon, because once you move into grade 11 after your GCSE, that will save you a lot. Anyway, so coming back to the question that why do we need to spend so much time to have a proper way of characterizing? Because your story needs to make sense completely from top to bottom. So if you have a certain problem which is coming towards the middle of the story, and right now you are creating your character, in the beginning you're starting off with your characters, if you give your reader a very clear idea of what your character is going to do in a situation which is very either tempting or scary, so your reader will already start thinking, your reader is already starting to think that oh, this guy seems to behave like this, so he might end up taking the problem very easily. Now this is your success as a writer, because you're able to make your reader think. And if your reader is thinking, that means your reader is part of your storytelling. What more do you want? Right. Next comes appearance, and I'm telling you, this is a must thing. Appearance is a must thing. Whenever you are bringing up a character, major, minor, you need to talk about the person's physical appearance. Even if you do not want to give out the physical appearance of the character in the beginning because of reasons, maybe because you're writing a mystery, a story, you need that, still make sure that you end up giving some hint about the person's appearance, because that is the most visible, most obvious thing about a person. How does that person look? And we are judgmental people. We look at a person and we think, oh, he looks like a liar. Oh, he looks like a terrorist. See, now that is also going to help you. In times, you can bamboozle your reader. The reader starts thinking whether maybe you're describing a person's outer appearance in a very shabby manner, because the person is a spy. Probably he's gotten that guise to come and sit in front of a corrupt politician's house to have a constant eye on him, and that person looks like a beggar because that is his guise. And when you're describing that, your reader might end up thinking, I mean, maybe he wouldn't have any idea, or maybe he would think, oh, this is a beggar. And he would stop thinking that beggar to react at any point of time. And when the beggar or the spy finally reacts, it will be a shock. But the shock is not going to put your reader off. He'll like it. She'll like it. Because we like to be surprised, and this is not a surprise or a shock that is something to do with your personal life. So it is not going to, hinder your mental stability, which is why I feel that appearances that can be very misleading is a good thing for your story, but you have to be very, very, very careful that while trying to mislead your character, your reader, you might end up giving a complete wrong notion. Right. Anyway, so we move on to how others' comments can also become very understanding of the person's character. And this is where you are allowed to tell. Maybe there are three brothers, and two of them are talking about one of them, and they end up using certain words which are very direct, that okay, he's a very submissive person, he's a servile person, he's a royal person, he always wants to make sure that he gets the best thing, he's a self-obsessed person, he's a self-important person, he is a selfless person, he is a dull-headed person. These things are possible, but again, remember, if you are trying to show your character only via others' comments, then you might end up making a mistake, because they are part of your story and you don't want them to tell your story. You want to tell your story. So this could be a support for your whole characterization, but this could not be your sole characterization. Similarly, as a teacher or as a reader, I don't want the author tell me so many things. Again, I told you. So again, this has to be used very, very cautiously, and this is only possible when you're doing a bit of both kind of point of view, when you have personal first person point of view and third person point of view together. Maybe then, while you are talking about third person, through your third person, you can talk a bit about the character from the author's perspective. But again, this is not going to be very helpful if you are basing your characterization either on other characters or authors' comments, right? I think this video is already very long. It's almost 24 minutes, so I don't want to drag it more. So we have talked about point of view, POV, and we have talked about characterization. I wanted to talk about conflicts, and how every story needs a proper conflict, and that conflict actually gives rise to how you want to characterize. So we have to be very careful about making sure that we can connect our conflicts and our characterizations. I'll come back with the conflicts class next, because this is quite long already. Thank you.